Today we're going to be having a discussion about Black dance in industry publications. I wanted to just say before we get started that I have business cards and postcards and 2 samples of previous issues that we have published. Jaslyn will be recording as well as doing, we have an email list that we would like you all to sign up for updates. This is the start of our first kind of like community engagement with people in the dance community. We're going to move forward with this to do some surveys, online surveys, to find out how best to serve the community, as well as how best to move forward in terms of a digital platform and to make it accessible to students, choreographers, artists, company owners, professors, and so forth. So I'm really excited to be here. So please, before you leave, I'd like you to sign up, and you just do it quickly through the computer so that I can send you some more information as we continue to prepare for our launch in 2020. So I'd like the panelists, starting with Tommy, to just briefly introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tommy Wahid Evans. I live in Philadelphia. I'm currently artist in res at Philadelphia, assistant professor at the University of Arts, and I'm a freelance choreographer.
And was a beautiful dancer.
Still is.
I'm Jelani Taylor. I live in Richmond, Virginia, coming from Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I'm currently a senior in the dance and choreography department at Virginia Commonwealth University.
I'm Julinda Lewis, and I'm a dancer, teacher, writer. I've been writing about dance and theater for, I can't believe it's been over 40 years at this point, for various publications. I'm also an adjunct professor at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, teaching dance and world cultures and dance history. I've taught dance in the public school systems in New York City. I can't remember what else I've done. I wrote for Dance Magazine for 20 years, and I consulted with the National Endowment for the Arts Dance Program and New York State Council for the Arts and Minneapolis Council for the Arts Dance Programs for a number of years.
I'm Anishana Akinley, and I'm a senior lecturer at Middlesex University in England, but I've also taught in universities in Canada and in the USA. I am a choreographer. I think of myself as a choreographer, really, but sometimes I choreograph words on the page. So, and I've written a book recently. I'm dyslexic, which I think is really important because my relationship with words and reading isn't sort of standard, but I think it helps in a way of writing about dance that to not necessarily come from a standard relationship with words.
Thank you all. So I'm going to read a brief excerpt from my proposal to just set the tone for our conversation today. In today's world, the push for minority representation is omnipresent. We see it in the entertainment world, in politics and education, a distinct lack of inclusion and a growing call for diverse coverage in these areas. African Americans have and continue to make significant contributions to the dance industry in the U.S. and abroad. However, Black dancers are marginalized due to the lack of news coverage and also funding opportunities. While it is important to acknowledge the historic rise of American Ballet Theater principal ballerina Missy Copeland, it is equally important to note that it has taken more than 75 years for a Black dancer to achieve this amount of media recognition. Most Black dancers, including dancers of predominantly white or Black dance companies, independent choreographers, and budding artistic directors, are marginalized. Copeland is the exception. Furthermore, colorism plays a significant role in her ascension. Her fair skin and silky textured hair has made her acceptable to the dance world because she has features that are close to the European standard of beauty. Copeland has also chosen to pursue a career in ballet, which is considered the foundation of dance. The invisibility of Black dancers in the media perpetuates racism in the dance industry and the erasure of Blacks as pioneers in the field. It also thwarts Black dancers from attaining viable employment and discourages young dancers from pursuing professional careers in dance. And this is actually my story and one of the reasons why I started this magazine. Dara Meredith, a Philadelphia dance artist, choreographer, and educator, described what it's like to be a Black dance artist in an industry that fails to diversify its media coverage. It's like we, Black dance artists, are all vying for the one spot allotted for Black dance in a publication that is not geared towards us. So, I'd like to just start off the discussion with our panelists to just talk about and just kind of devil's advocate, acknowledge or ask the question, is media coverage important to dance artists and our company or dance companies, and why?
Let me jump on that because I can see it from two perspectives. Having worked for the National Endowment for the Arts, having to write the audits for companies, as well as getting the opportunity, which was a lot of fun, to hand out money. That was my favorite thing. If a company does not have reviews published, your application is not considered as seriously. And that was true 20, 30 years ago, and I still hear companies saying it now. So if you're not getting the media coverage, people are more likely to marginalize you, to put your application off to the side.
And I'll go on that. Getting that coverage is based on relationships. It's like you can call the magazine or the newspaper and say, hey, I have the show coming, but if you know who's working there, be like, hey, we're ready to come to the show. Hey, give me my review, that's great, right? It's a different type of conversation. I think that's something that I've struggled working outside of a university setting, producing shows is like, well, I'm producing a show so I can try and apply for fellowships and applications and whatnot, and then the third thing they ask for is like press, right? It's just like, well, one, that's not something you learn, that's something that just happens, right? But then to get an audience, right, to have the press want to come, you need the press to say something, to get the audience, like, so it's a hard thing to navigate, right? And so media coverage is the only thing, like that's outside of your friends and family and people and posters, right, that people see, media coverage is the only way to get attention to what you're doing.
And in the city that we're in, the person who used to be the dance critic before I came was a sports writer. And yeah, and now the major newspaper that I have been working for 12 years is not covering dance at all.
So,
Stop.
No, Times Dispatch.
So my background is in dance, but it's also in journalism. I did not pursue dance because reading Dance Magazine as a student at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, going to multiple auditions at the two companies that I did feel got coverage, either it was like the LA Summer Intensive or the DCH Summer Intensive. Like I saw so many African American young girls vying for very few slots. That also matriculated into my parents saying, you will not major in dance in college. So I chose to major in journalism, and I went heavily into journalism, into like community news, politics, and even some national and federal news in Washington, D.C. So I know both how newspapers work. Most of the people who are writing at non-industry publications are people who have probably written for sports. Dance is usually combined with the lifestyle section, which is a combination of food, fashion, and whatever else that it might be happening that's like interesting in the city. When we also move forward into talking about the idea of Black dance, addressing some of the important issues that African Americans are facing, those people at these publications that are setting the agenda may not send someone because they don't want to see or want to publicize the idea of a piece of work talking about police shootings, or a piece of work talking about something that is socially, politically conscious or could possibly be in direct opposition to the dominant standard of culture. Does anyone else want to talk? I know, Tommy, you.
Yeah, I mean, jumping off what she was saying, that, you know, it is important when you're first starting your project that you're getting some type of coverage. So it is kind of difficult to make that stance in that area. But also, as I'm growing as a choreographer, I'm trying to step away from the fact that, like, you know, I need this validation from this person. So it's like this double entendre. It's like, you know, you want them there, you want this clip to say, but then you honestly also want to keep the integrity of what you were trying to do. And sometimes you do get a writer who don't understand the background, your research, your aesthetic. So then it kind of can work against you, but it's like this weird thing. And I also want to say, like, you know, I was a heavy reader in high school about Dance Magazine. That's how I honestly knew about Philadelphia and Day Contemporary and other companies like that. You know, it was a little small box they would have a review, or it was. I still remember Kim Y. Bailey's cover. She was in Rosa. So, you know, there is an importance that we want to see ourselves more, and that we need to be there. So it's like, you know, as I'm growing inside of it, it's just really weird. It's really complex. It's really loaded.
Thank you. And Adishola, can you talk a little bit about maybe the idea of Black dance coverage abroad a little bit?
Yeah, so I trained and grew up in England, and there wasn't really a sort of dance magazine that I would have even thought about looking at, to be honest, because it's very heavily trying to underline a particular aesthetic that is, you know, quite different from mine. So, and the problem is that then any small articles that are about black dance are really about it from the idea that it's some other thing, some sort of exotic other thing, rather than something that is about the reader is able to engage with as understanding it as being about their reality. It's about some kind of other reality somewhere else. So another thing about my experience is that then ends up that people start writing your history, your values, your story, and you suddenly realize you're not in your own story. You don't exist in your own story. So it was actually, dance magazines would be something that I sort of avoided in a way.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So actually I want to, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I think we often struggle with the idea of, like, what is black dance, and what does it mean, and what does it look like? And so I am just gonna read the definition that I've adopted, that is actually from Carol Y. Johnson, the first publisher that attempted to devote her career to making a magazine that really spoke to the black dancer, the feet. And so in her July 1971 issue, she wrote, "The term black dance must be thought of from the broadest point that must be used to include any form of dance in any style that a black person chooses to work within. It includes the concept that all black dance artists will use their talents to explore all known, as well as to invent new forms, styles, and ways of expression through movement. The term demands that within a particular style, the dancer will constantly strive for higher levels of artistic consciousness and will communicate the truths he finds in his personal search with the people of the community who also share in his artistic evolvement. Since the expression black dance must be all-inclusive, it includes dancers that work in 1, the very traditional forms, the more nearly authentic African styles, 2, the social dance forms that are indigenous to this country, which include tap and jazz dance, 3, the various contemporary and more abstract forms that are seen on the concert stage, and 4, the ballet, which must not be considered solely European." So we're going to move forward in talking about, we talked a little bit about why and the coverage is important, but I'm really interested in critiquing the quality of coverage. I know I just heard us talk about how like sometimes there's a whole article on someone and then there's this little thing. It's like, oh, go see Red Clay dance in Chicago. So I'm really interested in us exploring more. When I say the quality of coverage, we're going to operationally define quality by the amount, context, and frequency, and really pushing back on what Adeshola shared, making sure that we are also critiquing the idea of the otherness, the idea of the hypersexualized body, as well as like the ethnic, eccentric, exotic aspect of how Black dance bodies are covered, as well as how fetishized Black dancers or Black dance concepts can be taken out of context and not necessarily covered within the correct cultural context. So, with that said, what are your thoughts, experiences, and critiques about the quality of coverage in industry publications, such as Dance Magazine, such as Dance Informer, which is an online publication as well?
I'm going to say, so I'm talking a little bit more generally.
Right.
But one of the issues that I think is really important is what you've just said about understanding where the art is coming from and being able to critique it on its own terms. So a lot of times people ask a Black choreographer, for instance, what in England, and might be similar here, that what have you contributed to Black dance, or how is this Black dance? Whereas they would never ask a white choreographer, how have you contributed to white dance? Or even, will we ever try and say, what is this thing called white dance? So I think, as Brenda said, in a way, everything's Black dance. But there are definitely people that are working with a set of values and systems and rhythms that could be, we could sort of define as something to do with the African diaspora. And those values and rhythms and systems are not always understood by the people that are critiquing and writing about them. And so they get undermined or undervalued in general, but also they become the focus of explaining the principle and meaning and value behind them rather than looking at the artwork for itself.
That makes me think about the choreographic history book that Ms. Brenda contributed to. She said one time how looking at a review about Garth Fagan, the reviewer had more to say about the bow than about actually what was happening. So when we talk about content, I also want to say, how sometimes they are concentrating on some of the most random things, comparing Alonzo King to saying, like, why would he choreograph to Bop the way that George Balanchine's choreographed? It's kind of like, what is that really about? Like, what are we talking about? Like, trying to sift through, hidden meanings and, how these things are just, just blaming out wrong, are the fact that, Joe Miles Brown used to always say, when they want to put a Black ballerina on the cover, she's going to be in a leotard, but when they put a white ballerina, she's going to be in a tutu. And, it's just, how they want to display it. So, yes, I do think these things are very complex, and I do think these things are still living.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I want to say, I think it was a Dance Spirit cover a couple of years ago. One of the Figgins girls was on the cover, but she was in like a second position, fourth arch on point, in like a bathing suit, or like, it was very, while I was happy that she was on the cover, and I can say that I think because Black is popular now, organizations and companies are wanting to associate themselves with this idea of diversity and inclusion, but she was like Brenda said, hyper-sexualized. And it was literally like the focus was on her crotch, not on her, it was an image that was very difficult to receive, and really difficult to like celebrate as an example of like, okay, maybe dance media is getting it. So I'm really glad that you talked about that. That definitely, I think when we talk about quality and we talk about context, especially when it, as it relates not just to text and coverage, but when we're talking about the importance of images, that's really, really important. I think it's important for us to interrogate and the concepts of our images, as well as what that means and what that reflects to not just the industry as a whole, but to the general public about Black bodies in dance.
And I think it's important to notice that like the social justice movements that are happening in society, the media and production companies are seeing that and like, a lot of people are like paying a lot of attention to this. We should try to make money off it, right? You know, right? And then so they'll put these people on the covers, right? They're like, diversity and inclusion is what we're doing, but they don't really know what it means because they're interested in the financial aspect rather than the actually movement of what's happening. So they will make mistakes like that because they're not interested in having discussions on how do we do this. They're saying like, let's throw it on there. They'll see it and they'll buy it.
How do
right?
we capitalize on this?
Exactly.
Like important historical moment.
But I think that's happened also in criticism. You know, they expect us as an African American company to do something about social injustice. They expect us to move in the African vernacular. So when it comes to companies or choreographers working within that, you know, sometimes the coverage on that is so in depth, so heightened. And then sometimes with the choreographers are the companies that when they're trying to do something that's more neoclassical or something that's more contemporary, something that maybe like Royal Ballet did chroma, then Haiti does chroma, then the reviewer has criticism in the opposite way. They don't want to see it through a different lens and say, oh, well, let's enjoy this now. No, they want to say, well, I'd rather see Sarah Lamb do this instead of in a sense.
Or even critique the technique of the dancer.
Yes.
Or like try to really pick and pull it apart in a way that we know that they wouldn't do to a white company.
Yeah. If I could say one more thing,
Yes.
Elio, I'm so sorry. Elio Pomari one time did work on Danko, and he said that he choreographed this particular piece to Bach, and the day after it premiered, he was trashed. And he said in a week later, he redid the work and he did it to African drums. He said the same steps, the same format, the same composition, and he was praised. And I would never forget that when he told that story.
It was like, why? We both like Bach for the same reasons. Like, we both, like, I can like Cunningham just like you like Cunningham and be inspired and make work on that. Why am I different? Because...
But see, Donald Byrd is inspired by Cunningham, and the fact that he's inspired by Cunningham, then his work is erotic and it's sexual and it's all these things. But when you look at Cunningham, I see Donald Byrd. I see his influence.
But when that speaks to context, because if the work is racialized in a way that lacks the lineage and the historical context, then that's what you get. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'm jumping back. My mind, I didn't lose it. To something that Tommy said like 3 paragraphs ago, and then Jelani added on to what we were talking about, people getting it wrong. A few months ago, the editor of one of the magazines I write for had asked me to do a little short preview piece on this Indian dancer. And I knew nothing about her technique, her style of dance or anything. So I looked her up, I called her, and we had a half-hour conversation, and I said, tell me about your work. And so then I sent my piece in, and my editor got on the phone and he called me and said, you spoke to her? And the way he said it, it was like, okay, you asked me to write a preview piece about some Indian dance about which I know nothing. How am I supposed to speak about it intelligently unless I call the artist and say, can you tell me about your work? So he ended up saying, okay, well, write a little bit longer piece about it then. But he seemed totally surprised that I was going to ask the artist to tell me about the work that he wanted me to write about.
It's contemporary, Pocahontas. It's
Yes.
coming to
And I wonder, I think, like I said, I think these are issues of like lack of diversity in agenda setting gatekeeper positions, because it's like, oh, well, oftentimes we just want to put something in there, you know, for a little color, but we don't want to really know, or we don't even think that our readership or audience is really interested in the story because there's this otherness there.
It's really about controlling the story.
Mhm.
There's a real sort of push for the grand, you know, in sort of Western culture, for this grand narrative of a single story that talks about progression and has hierarchies in it. And any story that challenges that needs to be controlled, really. So having a firm grip on what stories are told and how they're told is integral to keeping the myth of an identity, which I think is really important, because you can't underestimate how frightening it is for somebody to start to feel that they're losing their identity and their privilege, and that the stories we tell threaten that, and that becomes a great danger, because they don't know how to deal with that. They don't know what they are if they're not better than someone else.
I think that is really imperative. I think that is really at the crux of probably why we're even having this discussion right now. I love that Dr. Brenda is in the room, and she talks about that, like in her work, that it's as if everything that is European is great, and no one takes anything from Black dance culture, but they can try it on, but when we do it, and it's what is very indicative to like our natural way of movement and being, it's critiqued or it's ignored as if it's not even happening. So I really appreciate you saying that.
I think I would just to add that I think that idea of explaining the values, finding out what the values are, is important, because there is people are not going to change. Like, there is a fear of them losing their identity. We can see how that's happening now
In American politics, yeah.
People are very scared of losing their own identity. And if we don't give them the steps into understanding as well, then they'll never find that for themselves, because it's safer for them to live in that fear and fight than it is to go beyond it and see what could be out there. So part of, I think, the thing that's really important about what you're doing is that you're also giving steps for people to come in to know how to get into something.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I do want to say real quick,
Yes.
to add to your beginning statement of talk about Misty Copeland as an anomaly, I think we should also, even though she's not dancing in the American context, the anomaly of Michaela de la Prince, right?
Absolutely.
Which is phenomenal, right? And I wish she was dancing for an American company, but she's living her best life, right?
But let's talk about why it is that she, as in the lineage or in the pattern of so many people of color who have felt that they could not practice their art in the confines of American society.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. As you said that, I was thinking that Isadora Duncan did the same thing, and like Louis Fuller did the same thing, and so it's interesting how I don't know. I haven't connected the parallel yet in my mind. I just thought about it, but it's interesting how as we are, we have this resurgence of diversity and inclusion and activism in this country as a forefront, when the same thing was happening with the origins of American modern dance. They had to do the same thing to activate. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the same the other way around. I think it's that people are more palatable as other when they are actually othered. You know, like if you're other, and then you go to another place, then people can accept you as being black because you definitely are other because you're from America, or it's the other way around. If you're from Europe, you're in America. So, but the people of the place that they're in shape the understanding of, you know, what is this person, and because they're other and yet they seem to be from here. So I think it's more palatable for you to be from somewhere else than people.
But then that also kind of feeds into that whole thing about the love for things that are exotic. Like when when dance was first introduced into the university programs in like the 1920s or something, you had ballet, modern, and ethnic. Everything else was considered ethnic. So, it was exotic, it was different.
Yeah, I mean, even at Ellington in the 90s, Carol Foster was my teacher, and like, we had an ethnic dance class, and it was like, oh, ballet history, but it was like, oh, the Catherine Dunhams, all of that over there is ethnic.
Like you're not qualified techniques.
Right, exactly. And then I grew up and I'm like, wait a minute, these women were anthropologists, and like they went and did primary research. Oh, okay, but we're just gonna like shake and be like, that's ethnic. And I think that unfortunately, that is still, it's a little bit more of a sophisticated lens now, but that's still the lens in which the dance world sees us. And I think that kind of leads into our next conversation, next topic of discussion. And just wanted to ask the panelists, like, do you feel, and I think Tommy talked about like feeling like, and I think at some point when you get to a certain level as a choreographer, the opportunities are going to continue to come, so media coverage or lack thereof may not impact as much, but I think more about people like Jelani, who is starting out. If you all can talk a little bit about how media coverage has impacted your career, or even like the organizations that you're affiliated with.
Sure.
I think I've been more impacted by preview articles and the coverage that the company is getting before the concert. I think that has, when people see that, oh, you did an interview about your work, or oh, your work is being presented at this concert with this company, I think that has impacted greatly with me. I think the reviews I receive sometimes has been kind of like not what I wanted or dreamed of. But I think that's just me working. And like I said, as you begin to take your choreographic career more serious, you can't lean on a review because everyone's opinions are different and histories. So how they're viewing your work is very it's hard. But I have been very appreciative of the articles that have come beforehand.
And with that, do you feel like has that been your process of trying to get previews? Like how has that come about?
Well, I think where I'm at in my career right now is like I'm no longer like seeking. I'm appreciative when it's happening, but when someone writes me a great preview article, I'm just like, oh, I'm grateful. Someone says a great line in a review, I'm just grateful. I think, like you said earlier, like when I first was starting, I needed it. I needed to put this on my resume, like, Tommy's an upcoming choreographer, thank you, from cool Cleveland, like, thank you, I needed that.
And what was that like trying to get that type of attention? Like, was
Draining. Draining because, you're learning as you're going. You're learning as you're going. Dance trains you, so every step of the way you're learning. You're learning as you're going, so it's awesome when you first accomplish, but then there's another goal to be set ahead. So I believe that is something that you cannot dwell in. You can't dwell in, and I think also what I've been learning about critiques is how I'm watching others' critiques. So I think that's how I arrived to this new thought of, well, I can't really wait for this genius review because they're trashing Alonzo King in the New York Times. And just keep working. Like I said, before I started choreographing, Elliot Kumar said that line, so that's kind of how I also went into this whole game. Okay, all right. So it's like you work for it, but you can't dwell in it.
Yeah. So I've co-produced 2 shows with my best friend, and we haven't gotten a preview or a review for either one of them. But we we produced our own media coverage to get fundraising. And we got $3,000 grants for both ones from our university. But the budget for the first one was $5,000. The budget for the second one was $6,000. So we needed to we did 2 Kickstarter campaigns for each one, and the producing content to promote the campaign to get the funding was like the top priority. We had to do that before we could even promote the show. To buy tickets, you need to give us money so we can have the show, right? And then the transition from that type of media production to the show promotion media production was always a challenge. But yeah, that's been my primary relationship with producing media, and it's made me really aware of there are no gatekeepers, right? Like if I felt like I wanted to be a dance critic in Richmond, I would go see dance shows and I would write a critique. I would make a Facebook page called Jelani Dance's Critiques, right? Dance critiques, and then I would publish my critiques, and then I would share them, and I would join a whole bunch of Facebook groups, and I would publish my little article on all the Facebook groups, and I guarantee you I would get more views than Style Magazine, right?
That's what happened, because I started a blog.
Right.
And the Richmond Times-Dispatch, which is a daily newspaper, was saying that, oh, nobody reads these reviews. They were actually publishing most of the arts reviews next to the obituaries.
Oh.
Yeah. The dance and theater reviews were on the same page as the obituaries. And they said, well, nobody's reading them. So I started a blog. It's been a year now. And they said, we can't tell how many people are reading the reviews. And I can tell you exactly how many people have read each one of my reviews.
Analytics. Yeah, it's absurd. Forget the magazine, right? Because there's no one, to be completely clear, no one is reading magazines. Dance magazine, if they stick to their same structure, will not exist in 20 years. I guarantee you.
Yeah.
They've tried to switch to like the website with like you scroll down and see an article with this horrible like orange background to the text. I'm like, this is not going to exist. Like this is, right? But when you start thinking about how vlog culture is booming and how podcast culture is booming, right? And then how like user interface and user experience is like that should be the focus of how you're presenting your information, right? Because books will never die, obviously, just like when books came, oral tradition didn't die, right? But right, when you are making something like a magazine, right, to engage with popular culture and as like media presentation, you have to parallel that with what's happening in culture, right? And print publications are happening in popular culture.
Yeah. So it's interesting that Jelani mentions that because I work at a university, and we actually, in my other life, we actually subscribe to dance, all of dance media, and our students don't read it. And it's really interesting to see students of all nationalities and cultural backgrounds not seeing these publications as viable options. So Jelani mentioning that with the advent of the internet and the accessibility to technology, it really empowers us to tell our own stories and to create our own content, and it does reduce or remove the barrier from the audience and the artist, with the publication being that gatekeeper. So it's really interesting that, and it's funny because I didn't like have that in here. So it's interesting that both of you all talked about that. So that was interesting. Do you have anything to add?
Well, going back to how I haven't had many reviews of my work, and when I have, they've been photographic work. They've been, as I said before, really asking why am I doing that work. Like I did a piece for a sort of friend's daughter, this is the styling place, and she's a Lakota. So and I wanted to make the piece so that her daughter could technically come to see it. We weren't able to do it in Pinewood, in her area, but that she could come to see it and she would feel at home in the theatre space. And so it had a sort of underlying principles and ideas around sort of Lakota tradition. And the review said, why would a black choreographer be making work about Native Americans? That has got nothing to do. I mean, why can't I? Like, why is it that why do I have to be making work about justifying my blackness all the time? Which is, I think, what especially in England, they're basically expecting the work to be about explaining to them what it is like to be me, really. Because I've had many reviews, alongside that is this danger of reviews always being about emerging artists, like people have been emerging artists for 40 or 50 years and having to be discovered, you know. And so I've sort of, in a way, shied away from them now because I don't want to be discovered. I feel quite established. I don't want people to be writing about my work as if it's emerging. It's emerged.
Wow, that's great. That sums it up right there. And then I have like two more like general questions, and then we are going to open it up for a Q&A. So it's interesting that we're hearing that artists can create their own content and control their own narrative. Actually, no, I do want to ask Jalinda, because you have had opportunities to write for publications like Dance Magazine. Have you seen an artist or an organization's success impacted Black coverage?
I can't really say that I have. When you're writing for what they consider to be the major mainstream publications, it's very controlled. You pretty much have a format, a formula that you stick to, and you write to that formula. You don't get to choose much about what it is that you're going to write about. You know, you go into the monthly meeting or the weekly meeting, and they say, okay, we're going to cover this, this, and that, and you can do this. You know, you can make a suggestion. You know, I was there for 20 years, so sometimes my suggestions were listened to, sometimes not. But I don't think that the writer really has that much control over what's going to get published. It's all about the numbers. You know, if I see that a major ballet company is buying full-page ads, they're going to get more coverage than anybody else.
Which leads into the idea of like resources and influences. And if we already know that Black dance companies are struggling or don't have as many resources, or they need the news coverage to get the resources to get them, like it really is this like ongoing like Ferris wheel, or like we are falling into like the donut hole of lack of opportunity. So moving forward, to address a lot of these issues, and almost as a cathartic way to make sense of my own personal experience, I birthed Black Dance Magazine, and I'm interested in asking the question, is there a need for a Black Dance Magazine in the 21st century? Why or why not? Jelani, you said some really interesting points about how you were able to utilize Kickstarter or a funding source, and you were able to utilize media devices to create your own message and reach directly to your own audience. When I look at the idea of Black Dance Magazine, not only it's less about the reviewing or the subjective aspect of it, and it's more about it being used as an information source so that Black dancers can understand the systems that we are working within. It is more about creating space for these difficult conversations. It's about creating spaces for elders and historic information to be documented and made accessible, so that we can continue this work and we can empower the next generation of Black dancers to continue this work with the blueprint. So yeah, that's the question. And I think whoever wants to take that on, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. But yeah.
This is cool. Yeah, I think it's a I think it's an endeavor. I think it's a hard endeavor.
I can tell you it is.
Yeah. Mainly because of the variance, and I don't know when we started calling black dance, or how that came about, right?
I can tell you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's the issue of dance and then black dance, right? And the variance of that is troubling. And if I was like, which I'd never do, if I was running a studio and I was like, here's Dance Magazine and here's Black Dance Magazine, right? And then I could just see like the small line of black kids reading Black Dance Magazine, everybody else reading Dance Magazine. I'm just like, I don't know if the homogeneous of that is something that would be effective in terms of communal understanding of appreciation and whatnot, right? Because I want everybody at my school to read your magazine, right?
I do too.
Right, and so I think that angle is something that has to be addressed. So yeah, I think we'll say that.
And that's something that I've been thinking about too. I mean, here we are, okay. It's 2019, and we're still debating, do we need to have a Black Dance Magazine? But then, okay, I've been in this art world for over 40 years, and we're still making firsts, okay? That's troubling to me. It's like, okay, after all the stuff that I went through when I was your age, it's still happening. And so, yeah, there is a need. But then what do we call it?
Right.
Because if you're going to say, okay, here's Dance Magazine, here's Black Dance Magazine, then you're going into that hegemony where you've got this is up here and that's there.
Right.
And we don't want to have that. We want things to come together. How do we achieve that with some sort of equity?
And it's almost like, like the history of media and race relations, like you needed BET in the 80s, like that just needed to happen, right? Because there was no other way. And then, but once BET was first on USA Channel, right, they had the little segment block, right? And then after 3 years, they're like, we can do this by ourselves. Like we can make a lot of money, forget USA, right? They got their own channel, yeah? And then that made a lot of money. And then you start seeing more black movies, like you start seeing like culture in terms of TV and film more valued because they saw, oh, this thing works.
Once
right?
mainstream found out that BET could make money, they said, oh, we need to jump on this.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that it's the same thing as what we were talking about earlier with trying to leverage the use, exploitation, for lack of a better word, of social justice movements, right, to make money. It's like, how do we enter those spaces and be like, this is how you do it, right? If you want to do this, because you're gonna make money off this, right? But you need to know how to do it right, so that we actually like rock with it, right? It's like how they did Nike. I think Nike did the Kaepernick situation very well, right? Because they're gonna make a lot of money off the Kaepernick situation, right? But they presented it in the right way,
Yes.
with the right slogan, right, to go with it, that I personally was empowered by, right? And then started this whole social media giant thing that really helped boost Nike's brand, right? And whether they were using that as them fighting social justice or for them to make money, which was for them to make money, it worked, right? And I think even though it's not the ideal utopian way of going about it, if we can leverage their interests to push the fight for equity and inclusion and diversity, then it's something that we should do.
I think I agree about the black dance thing. It can sort of isolate a little bit, or like look as if there is such a thing that has as white dance. You know, as if white dance hasn't actually sort of borrowed so much from black dance anyway. But I do think that there's, I think what in the past what that was doing was trying to add a shortcut to explaining a whole load of principles and histories and cultures. And I think that thinking about those principles and for me, they're things like resistance and multiple stories, different, not necessarily agreeing with hierarchies, this idea of honoring elders and family. Those kind of principles can be the underpinning of a magazine that will then feel like the idea that we're calling black dance, but doesn't have to identify, ring fence it for only blackness. It's a way that lots of people want to engage with whatever they are. And you can also run the danger of having something called black dance that starts off like that, and without those principles so really firmly written in, gets used or shifted or melded into something that just becomes like the other things anyway.
Right.
So I think that it's within the guiding principles of the magazine that happens. And another thing I wanted to say was that I also think there's a real divided dance between like the students, and then there's the teachers that teach in the places that are in malls and things like that. And then there's the universities,
The competition places.
Then there's the professional dancers. And I think it's important to start to have conversations across these things, especially as media influences what people think dance is. And if we don't have these conversations across these places of dance, then the story that media's write about what dance is gets perpetuated because we're not making the connections across each other. People that come from those male dances come into universities and they've got a whole other picture of what dance is, and then they feel like they're meant to sort of betray what they did before, or they don't know how to match them together. The people that are teaching in those places, there's just a kind of disconnect that I think we could be a lot stronger if there was. I'm not saying we got to have a magazine that tries to talk to everybody, but just one that starts to melt the idea of these hierarchies in dance that are more sort of a Western built structure of having to hierarch things before you can figure out what they are. And then the last thing is, I think the digital part is really important, that people engage with something that they feel that they can make an impact in as well. That sort of Web 2.0 is a way of feeling like you have a voice in the story that you're looking at.
It's interesting that everybody just gave me a lot to talk about, to share with about Johnny's question about like how did we come up with the term black dance. I am going to reference Dr. Brenda's book, The Black Dancing Body, and she talks in the book about, because it's also my proposal, and she talks about black artists not claiming the term black dance and the fact that mainstream media outlets actually assign that term to black choreographers' work to distinguish their works from white counterparts. I found that it was important for this conversation to be intergenerational because we look at the term black dance and it has had a history of contention amongst African American dancers. younger generation of Black dance artists, like Camille Brown, like Leela back there, claim this idea of like, claim that their work is steeped in Blackness on purpose. But then you look at artists like Bill T. Jones, who said, I don't want my art to be racialized. I want it to be N.
That's not generational.
Yeah,
That's not generational. That's difference in style. Okay,
I
that's
agree.
different. Because
Yeah.
Bill T. Jones, what he does, just because you prefaced it, sorry.
No, it's okay.
You prefaced it by a generational thing. So there are people in both of those generations that have the opposite ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And I can.
Sorry.
No, thank you, Ms.
Go ahead, I'm tired of talking
I
was waiting for you to say
yeah,
something.
No, I'm glad you did. I was too. I was glad that you came back. So
Okay.
she left. No, I agree. I didn't want to, when I say it's generational, I wasn't trying to like typify that like this generation thought this. But I was saying making those examples because even within our communities, there are people who embrace the term and people who don't. And over the course or the arc of certain artists' careers, they have embraced it and then rejected it for multiple reasons based on where they were in their journeys. So I think that's really, so I just kind of wanted to touch on that. I forgot the other thing I was gonna say, but yes, you can, let's kind of do some final stuff on this and then I do want to open it up for discussion.
I'm just saying off.
Oh, I'm sorry, and I didn't know if Tommy had a, no, okay.
I was saying off what we were just talking about. My best friend that I produced 2 shows with, she would be much more on the Camille Brown side, and I would be on the Bill T. Jones side. Like I wouldn't want. I feel like I'm a contemporary of this American modern dance thing, and she's like, I'm making some Black dance, okay, right? And I think it's very true for someone like Camille, who is making work specifically based off a, well, in terms of Mr. Tolerance and the African performance narrative, in the case of Black linguistics, the Black female experience growing up, and the work is specifically reflective of those experiences, and those experiences alone, from what I see, yeah, and to even though even the vocabulary is completely like social dance. I was about to say that even though it comes from like a lineage of American modern dance, but not really. She's really taken like funk dance and jazz dance. She has like a jazz pianist who's on stage the whole time, right? So like it's coming from a lineage that it really couldn't be called anything else. But we need to specify that when it happens, right? Because to umbrella term Black dance for all Black artists is like. And then now I'm like thinking it's two sides, because like whatever I make, I'm Black and it's dance, so it's definitely Black dance, right? And but if the nuance in which we use it and address it when talking about different artists in specific contexts, we just need to be aware and always be critical of whether we are variancing people or being inclusive to everybody's choreographic identity.
Yeah, thank you. And that like the duality of feeling that like what the conflict that you just experienced is something that I experience constantly. What I wanted to say to Ashfola's point was that I really struggled with the model and the platform and the content because I found myself trying to approach this work through the European journalistic objective lens, and I see the work, which means like it is just dance magazine with some Black people in it, you know, which is not why I started this work. And the purpose of it is, the purpose of the work and why I felt that it needed to exist was because I could see that there was this hierarchy, and we are all, dance is the one thing that unifies us. So why can't we have a magazine that just celebrates dance with all folks? So what I've now shifted to is that journalism and storytelling is the mechanism that I'll use to serve the community instead of trying to create a product to generate revenue, to continue the cycle, to continue this idea of the agenda setters, the publicized, so, and those core values that you talked about.
Sometimes I think it's useful to just make up a new word, because the words we use are so sort of steeped
And loaded, absolutely.
Even if it's just for yourself, that you sort of say your new word to yourself, that's what you're making. So you can really make something that is, unique to what you're doing, rather than have it shaped by the language that you use.
And I agree with that, because some of the language that we have is already so steeped with meaning because of history, that we need to say, okay, this is what we're doing now, and I'm going to call it this. Whatever it is you want to call it, we're going to call it this now.
No, this is great. So now, with that said,
She's had her hand up a very long
yes,
time.
with that said, we're gonna start opening up for questions. So let's go with Leela, and then Dr. Brenda, and then Jasmine. Yep. Okay.
Please introduce yourself to the community.
I'm Leela Aisha Jones. I'm in Philadelphia. I have an ensemble called Flyground, and purposely do not call it a company. And we can talk about that later. And I'm also here as a representative of the steering committee of Coalition of Diaspora and Scholars Moving with Dr. Brenda. And I just wanted to say something about just the way that we just almost immediately dichotomize, like, people who don't want to be racialized and people who are doing dance that is blackness or that is claiming blackness in a certain kind of way. And just really challenge myself and all of us to work through how we are all translineaged in the way that we practice dance, and that, okay, so I do claim steeped in blackness because I want to make sure that the root is there and that people don't just come in the room. I'm educating, right? So like you could be an educational person in this process, right? Where you're educating your audience about what they're coming to see. But also, Cynthia Oliver has described my work as an intersection of performance art, installation, and dance. So the landscape is multi-lineage, right, of what, and then also when people see my dance, they see blackness, but they don't always see the African diasporic beyond the U.S. or beyond what is blackness in the U.S. And you can clearly, if you study Guinea dance or you can clearly see that it's there, but the way that it's infused is in a landscape of what I was trained in. Which includes Cunningham and includes contact improvisation and includes somatics and includes, so I think I just want to suggest that as we move forward, we talk about ourselves and everybody else in this translineage kind of format, that we are intersections of things, and that I don't want to be racialized either, right? I mean, none of us do. But I do think we have to face the reality that when we stand up as the person that we are, there's going to be things that are said and assumptions that are going to come with that. I'm not saying that you have to be all about that. I'm just saying another assumption that we make is that, or we split that up like that. And I just feel like there's something that's not black about that. Right? Like it's something, we're not like that. Like in our functioning with each other, we're not like that. So, we have to keep figuring out how to not talk about each other like that. And the other thing I wanted to say about writing is that I think this, I don't even know if it's an emerging category, I'm gonna go away from that, but like the way that people are working around writing reflections and like comrading writers and artists, and also how artists are writing about themselves, which I also feel like that should be, when you're writing about yourself, you should be in conversation with other people about that when you're doing that as well. But I wonder how these kind of platforms can do this comrade work, because through the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage, I was paired with Jumatatu Poe to write a reflection of the general work that he was doing. And this is sort of like a preview, right? But that felt more like, I could talk about his process and I could talk about how he was coming into this work. And I think and then I could write about the work when I saw it. And I think it's just an important model that we can keep birthing, that, you know, and to just move away. Not that we don't need critique, I'm not saying that, but maybe those kind of spaces are not the right platform, or the way that we're doing it now is not quite the way. It needs to be comprehensive. And we need spaces that's like for Black folk, I really believe that, and we need spaces that are for everybody, but we need to love each other in those Black spaces. We still need those spaces. I deeply believe that. So I just want to, I don't think we should move away from that so much as we need comprehensive, just like movies. We don't just want Tyler and Medea. We don't just want Tyler and Medea, right? Like, we want all these perspectives. Like, we want, if Bill Street, we want all of these. We want the horror movie, even though I know don't think I can go see it. Okay, I'm done. That's all I wanted to say. But yeah,
Just for me, this conversation is important because I want to address those issues. Like, and I don't think that there's a right and a wrong. I feel like in 2013, like, I was this very ambitious person standing at an IABD conference in DC, like, I'm gonna launch this magazine, and I literally like opened up a can and like all this stuff came out, and I'm just like, okay, so how do we deal with this as a community, and how do I get the input from the community to use this as a platform to continue these conversations? Yes.
So a lot of thoughts from the very beginning, but just a little bit about the whole thing of titling something and not taking it from quote unquote the mainstream, and this whole question of language. Like yesterday, what I did say was that all the dance that we do is Black dance. You know, that the whole thing of modernism is very much dependent on Blackness, and on the Blackness that comes from the incredible aesthetics of Africa. And Africa is this huge continent that has brought, quote unquote, I don't call it the West, I call it European, because a lot of Africa is in the West. Okay, but for European thinking, it's been feeding European thinking for centuries. And as Adishola was addressing, there's this kind of fear of identity around that. But our identity is threaded through everything that we are living, yet we are still having to define ourselves. And of course, we do have a dual purpose. We have to both define ourselves in their terms because they've got the box. So we have to learn to, of course, code switch. And we're doing that in many ways, embodying code switches, verbalizing, thinking code switches, as well as trying to keep our own identity. So the kind of double consciousness that Du Bois talked about so long ago, we're still having to do that, yet wanting to do this other thing. One suggestion is this thing about naming. How about ours? Ours, okay? Or our dance, with a mission statement that should come in every issue. But just to somehow debunk and, as they like to say, unpack the hegemonic understanding of what something that we want to do has to be in their terms. That it should be our terms. And yes, we do want, as Leela is saying, we do need Black spaces in writing, in ritual, in loving, in everything. We could all think about like other ways of saying who we are, that we don't have to define our identity in their terms. And of course, people like Bill T. Jones and Gus Solomons have gone through seismic changes about their Blackness. You know, Gus Solomons, I did an interview for a piece that he did with Val de Setterfield in Berlin, because I work in this Berlin festival every year. And Gus was so incredible talking about that he has just discovered he's Black. And I mean, this was like really, it was so wonderful. And he does puppets. And he had a puppet of himself talking to a puppet of Cunningham. You know, he did, in this piece, it was just like, and I know that Bill T is also, and he's preparing, you know, even that Bill did the We Shall Not Be Moved choreography for the Philadelphia Opera. And he is now preparing another piece that he's doing that'll be at the Mann Center. That, you know, so we are evolving constantly in terms of being people of color, or whatever you want to say it, and people discovering identity in certain ways. I have an issue with the thing about Misty Copeland and the colorism and the light skin, because she has so clearly always articulated the fact that she is black. She has made and she didn't try to pass as many people did. And truth to tell, once you're in a company like that, ABT or, you know, whatever, the New York City Ballet, they are not so interested if you're light or dark. For them, it's just that you're black, you know. So, I mean, there's, I feel that she's taking a lot of shade, if you will.
No, I think, and I wasn't giving her shade, I think that is, I think that.
But that's not, you know, that's really not necessarily the case. There is, I mean, it really is about the fact that you're black. Deborah Austin, when I moved to Philly in the 1980s, she was a principal with the Pennsylvania Ballet. She did not look like she could pass, but she was a principal. The woman with, Dolores has gone, but the woman who was a principal with the Texas, the Austin Ballet.
Laura Anderson?
Yes, yeah, who definitely, you know, and these are all exceptions, but what I'm saying is that they are still exceptions, whether they're light-skinned or dark-skinned, because they are black. Yeah. Okay. And then just a lot of stuff around implicit bias. As Tommy was saying, you know, sifting through hidden meanings. And again, what we're talking about in the whole current atmosphere is we've seen this incredible new resurgence of racism. And what we have also seen, though, is this, it's so insidious. That's why Lila and I and Soroya started this thing called the Coalition for Diasporan Scholars Moving, because of the implicit biases, because of the microaggressions, and of course, and I will shut up in a minute. In one sense, you have to, you know, teach them, but then the other thing is they've got to learn on their own. I've just been suggesting to white people who believe in me at all, please get a copy of White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Read that book seriously and take it upon yourselves. And it's not like, oh, somebody else, white, is having implicit biases. It's that you are having them, even though you are sitting here in this room and you are our ally. So that's the place that we have to begin to make the changes. What else? That's all. Okay. I rest my case.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I had a question about like just ideas that you have or other people have about like how the platform of this magazine. Because I know before you had print, and then what Jelani was saying, like how many students do not pick up print magazines. I mean, I only pick up print magazines when I actually want the cover and be like, ooh, I got the magazine. Like, my future generation be like, look, see, I have it. But, or to create a vision board for myself. That's the only time I like go buy magazines, and they're at half-price books. So I was wondering your ideas, and then I'll just share my ideas after you share yours.
So, it's complex because my background is in print. Like, I love print. I think print is very important. Even though we are in a digital age, this physical thing, being in a physical place where there are dancers of color, and young people who need to see a reflection of themselves. That's very important. And what I hear is that there are subsets of an audience that have different needs and want to experience the magazine in different mediums, which takes money. So the print aspect was very expensive. I am at the point now where I've transitioned from for-profit to nonprofit. IABD is my fiscal sponsor, so I can accept donations, and I'm going to be applying for grants. I am going to start with a digital publication. I think it's really important to have images, but then eventually move forward to having more interactive content. Like, we have a YouTube channel. A great thing, like when I went to graduate school, I took like a interactive journalism course, so I know how to edit and shoot video. Oftentimes but like, I am one person, and I used to think, oh, I can literally do everything. This is such a huge undertaking that honestly, I don't have that full answer right now. We'll start off as a digital publication, and there are a couple of different, some open source sites that turn what would be this physical copy into a clickable, like, PDF turn pager, which is ideally what I'd like to start with. And even some more sophisticated programs can like embed video and interactive aspects into something like that. I'm looking to start and do it quarterly, but I still think that even if it's an annual issue, there needs to be something physical. People who own studios, people, like I said, there's different people that have different needs. And I'm always hearing like, no, but we need this somewhere. And so the challenge is, how do I do that? Yeah. But also, so I'm going to be doing, I have a survey, which is why I'm asking for everyone's email. I have a survey, and the survey asks, how do you get your dance news? What platforms do you use? Because I want to make sure that I'm making it accessible to everyone. Yeah.
Say, I subscribe to Dance Magazine, but I only subscribe to the app. So I
Same.
So it's for anybody who doesn't know, every month they come out and you open the app and there's 2 columns of all of their magazines that's gone so far, and the most recent one is up in the top left-hand corner. You click it, and then it shows you the cover, and you open it, and it works as a reader, right? And then you can select which article, right? It shows you how much you progress through each section, and then you can go through like that. I hate it completely. I think it's the ugliest user experience design that I've worked with because I'm using it as an app. The app. The app it looks like a PowerPoint cover because it has the normal iPhone app, but then it's a gradient background and dance in black, and then magazine and little, and it's terrible. I hate looking at it when I scroll to my phone, right? Because that's not how you design an app. It's how you design a PowerPoint cover. They just fit that into a box, which means they haven't really made an app. They've just found out how to place their magazine on an app, right? And make me pay for it.
But the interesting thing about that is the company has had such a monopoly on dance publication that they can do anything and people will still buy it because of the brand. Because they were first. Right? But like I said earlier, the gatekeepers are now gone because anybody can do it and rival it, right? And specifically, because they've been there so long, they are not so quick to adapt to what's happening, right? Because they're stuck in their ways, which have been profitable for them. They switch CEOs consistently. I have a lot of research there. I just don't, and so the reason why I don't think they're going to last is because there are so many forms in which they are not taking advantage of that are critical to being a media company today. So
one, they don't have a podcast. Like this is like the number one thing for me. So I think my answer to the question is like, you have to live in the platform appropriately to the platform, right? And so so they have to have a different strategy for the app than they do for the print publication, because
And they're literally just dumping.
they're just dumping, right? And so, because having an app is different from having an application, right? Their website needs to be geared to people searching on the web, not people who are reading a magazine, right? And, or not people like, one company, I think Givney does their website very well for people who are searching the web, right? And then there's like nuanced difference between something that is like a Facebook website, right? How Facebook has it, because there's multiple users using an interface socially, than someone who's just searching a website to read and engage with content, right? That's why YouTube has a different setup than Facebook Watch, right? Because Facebook Watch is so, like, so we need to like understand.
Lonnie's gonna come and work for me.
Understanding the nuance of a Snapchat and an Instagram, and then leveraging that to power your content, right? So wherever you go, not only are you engaging with new content because it's on a different platform, you can re-engage with the same content in a different way, right? And that's what people will subscribe to and pay for consistently.
So with that said, I'm really interested to hear what people think about this as the user.
Just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying, I work in education, and you know, one of the areas where we run programming is in collaboration with the public housing in New York City and the community centers. And I just think like a lot of the students that we see there just aren't going to be accessing this in that digital way.
I mean, yeah, because we also have to think about the idea of the digital divide.
So having something like that in the community center where they're just hanging out anyway and can pick it up and thumb through it. They may not even read the articles, but I think it's important for it to be there for them.
And do you find that the kids in the community center do pick up print media?
I would say that they kind of, you know, they pick up things that are around.
They do.
To entertain themselves while they're there.
Not just on their iPhones.
No, well, because, you know, they don't have phones.
They don't have phones,
I was just going to say an idea, but I don't know how it would work, but just to put it out there. I think that the sort of idea of a magazine is this old idea that somebody had knowledge and they put all the knowledge together and then you have to come and knock on the door and be let into the knowledge. It is this kind of structure for a lot of things within old systems of education, magazines, and the internet has allowed us to say, the information's out there. So I wonder about, instead of thinking about a magazine that has to be all in a place, that it lives across different things and different stories are relevant on different platforms. So some of the magazine lives on Instagram, some of it lives in a thing that you can touch. So you'd be thinking about it as an entirety, but it wouldn't be be split into these different platforms, rather than limiting to yourself to this sort of older structure of kind of the ivory tower that has all the information in it, that people have to go to that place, that it can be spread across. And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about different stories. Different stories deserve different ways of being told, not being told in the same way. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up just a little bit. In addition to the sort of purpose of the content of the magazine and the communities that you might want to reach, I think it's important to also adhere to the overall just practice of maybe potentially just producing that physical piece for you as an artist, as a practitioner.
Oh, wow.
What about this part of it that exists? Is this a medium in which you wish to exist and to interrogate your own craft? And I think, in the idea of ensuring that you reach these different populations, we have to make sure that we don't negate the artist and the practitioner that's actually doing the work. So what is it that your desire might be?
huge.
That's nice.
None of this matters if you don't have the
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
You can have it geared to whatever platform you want. You can have it dispersed to all these populations, but if it's not a thing, it's not going to have the impact.
Yeah.
It's what- yeah.
So all these platforms would still have your name, the name, or your name?
Yeah.
I feel like, well, the name is. Now I'm like, okay, so.
Just
it's-
rhetorical.
Yeah,
Rhetorical
I think it's a thing that, so people say if you do what you love, you wouldn't mind doing it for free, you do it all the time. Like there are days where like I'll go to my day job, but then I can be up. Like it feeds me, and I never really thought about doing it for that purpose. I think I thought about doing it for serving, and so that people don't, and I definitely feel like my path was my path, but I do feel like a lot of the life choices that I made was in direct result of just either not being educated or not seeing images. And so that is really important, and I think this idea of media representation, whether it's people of color in STEM or people of color, like I think it's really important for people to see themselves reflected in areas that they want to exist. That then in turn feeds them as, and feeds their purpose in whatever area that is. So I never really thought about that, so that really gives me something.
Well, you're important.
Yes. Yes.
Go on, Jasmine, turn off the camera. So yeah, I know that we may be running out of time. No one's come in the room, so that's good. But I wanted to, for folks to sign up for our email newsletter, because this has been a very fruitful discussion.
Yes.
I definitely don't think, like I thought I didn't know a lot before, and now I'm like, okay. But the great thing is that I feel like there's a community of people, and I don't have to know it all, and I don't have to do it all, which is something that Black women struggle with all the time.
Right.
But so I definitely want to keep the conversation going with people in the room, and I'm really grateful that you all came out and excited that we're going to be moving forward with Black Hour Dance. In whatever way,
Our Black
whatever
Dance.
platform.
Our Black Dance.
Another thing that I realized is that like Black dance is not in museums.
Oh.
So last year,
Not even.
No, I'm sorry. In 2017, I presented on Black women in dance at a symposium at the African American Museum in Philadelphia. There was a proposal for a symposium called Black Women in the Movement. And I put it together like during my break for like holiday break during for the university that I work for, and I saw it and I was like, I bet no one submitted anything about dance. So I put something together, and it was about Black women in dance challenging aesthetic, cultural, and gender norms. And Dr. Brenda was in it. Diane was in it, Leela was in it. Like it's really like crazy that people in the room were in, and it talked about women these women that challenged these norms in dance and in society from the 20s to current day, and also the importance of this like idea that there were intergenerational relationships, like these women knew each other and sat at the helm of each other's and supported each other, and like how do we kind of keep that going? And so I see the magazine as like, okay, the magazine, but then like the website, but then like YouTube, but then like it all has so many legs, and so I'm really excited.
Keep working with Jelani.
Yeah, Jelani is
Really,
I'm gonna be coming to Richmond to see
This is a
Jelani.
nice connection.
So yeah, so if you could see Jaslyn before you leave, if I don't know if anyone has any closing or final thoughts. I don't.
Diane had her
I'm
hand up.
just full. Okay, I'm full. I don't really know what else to to say, you're like got me crying, y'all are snapping. So I'm really happy and thank you.